Hi everyone, my name's Clayton Mead and I'm a research assistant at UNSW Sydney. I'm going to be talking about Operation Posidonia, which is a citizen science project aiming to get local communities involved in the restoration of endangered seagrass meadows. Operation Posidonia is based at UNSW Sydney and the Sydney Institute of Marine Science. It's led by Professors Adriana Verges and Alastair Poor. In the team, there's also myself and Derek, who are research assistants. But over the last few years, Operation Posidonia has grown significantly, and we now collaborate with a lot of different industry bodies, government bodies, and NGOs, and most recently the Careel Bay project. And our funding and support comes from a mix of sources from philanthropy and government grants and things like this. So this is the species that we're all about. This is Posidonia australis. It's a beautiful, large seagrass. It's the largest seagrass that we have in New South Wales. And it forms these incredibly dense green underwater meadows in shallow estuaries and bays around New South Wales. Posidonia is incredibly important as a foundation species. So it forms the habitat on the seafloor. It creates a nursery area for juvenile fish and crabs, especially for species that we like to fish for and value culturally. It's habitat for some iconic species like the white seahorse. And then it also provides a lot of benefits to people as well, especially in this space of climate resilience and climate change mitigation. So the leaves themselves as existing as a meadow and then also as washed up decaying material protect shorelines from erosion. The meadows are incredibly effective at filtering out particulates from the water and improving water quality. And then seagrasses are also extremely effective at capturing carbon from the atmosphere, and they're recognized as one of the most efficient natural carbon sinks in the world. But we are unfortunately losing seagrass meadows in general at an alarming rate. And in New South Wales, Posidonia australis meadows in particular are officially classed as endangered in 6 estuaries. And these are the 6 estuaries where the most people live. The coastal environment has been changed by people the most. And one of those estuaries is Pittwater, right here where we are today. Over the years, Posidonia has declined due to a range of threats, things like coastal development, dredging, pollution and runoff are also massive stresses for seagrasses. But more recently, one of the biggest threats to Posidonia meadows has been traditional boat moorings. So moorings that have a heavy swinging chain that scours the seafloor. And you can see here that in the image here from above in Lake Macquarie, the lighter patches are what we call mooring scars. So areas where the boat chain has swung around on the seafloor and scoured everything in its path. And this is a problem because the scale is quite massive, and also that Posidonia grows incredibly slowly. So even after you remove the mooring from one of these scars, Posidonia can take decades and decades to actually revegetate naturally on its own. And so that's where we come in, and we started to get thinking about how can we go about restoring this species, despite the challenges that, the threats are still ongoing, moorings are still an issue, development is still an issue, and then also that we have remaining meadows which are incredibly vulnerable to threats, and they grow incredibly slowly. And so unlike in other restoration projects, taking the seagrass from one place and transplanting it in another place is not really an option for this species. And there's just not enough of it left, especially in these places where it's declined so dramatically. And so what we did was come up with a creative solution using Beachcast fragments of Posidonia. So this site here in this image of the beach is quite familiar to everybody, I'm sure, where you're walking along the beach and we have along the high tide line an accumulation of leaves and other biological material, and that's what we call rack. And as a part of this rack, sometimes we have pieces of Posidonia that still have the rhizome, which is the brown root structure at the base, attached. And if these fragments are not dehydrated and found in time, we've actually shown that they can be replanted underwater in places where the species has gone missing, and they can actually survive at very high rates for seagrasses. So this is a really promising and exciting solution. But of course, when you do restoration, there's no point trying to restore something if it's just going to disappear again or disappear in another place. And so we know that we also need to address the cause of decline. And so what we did in our proof of concept project in Port Stephens was combine restoration with Beachcast posidonia with the use of environmentally friendly moorings. So these moorings don't have a chain that sits on the seafloor. They have a neutrally buoyant rubber component that connects up from the block up to the buoy. And we've shown that you can still have a mooring and a boat and seagrass restoration together. So it's a win-win for the seagrass and for boat owners. And this is something that we're now replicating in Lake Macquarie, and we're trying to do as well in other estuaries. However, before we get to the point where we can ask citizen scientists to go out and collect the posidonia and donate it for restoration in a new estuary, for example, we actually need to do quite a bit of forework to understand where can we find these viable posidonia fragments, can we find them, and under what conditions? So what winds and tides predict their accumulation? And that is because there's just not very many of them in general. And so when we ask people to go out and search, we want them to be going out, at the best possible time to collect as many as they can and make it a really efficient process. And so that's the part that we're at now for Pittwater and for Careel Bay, which has dense posidonia meadows just below the surface. And so what we're asking people to do as part of the Careel Bay project, and everyone's welcome to get involved in wider Pittwater as well, is help us answer two questions. Are there viable posidonia fragments available in Pittwater for people to collect? And then can we predict their accumulation? So based on environmental conditions, especially things like wind and tides. And so what we're doing with Careel Bay is the project's all set up on the Guys app, asking people to record sightings of these fragments, record some of the morphological features, so things about the leaves and roots that we know predict survival. And then also what we can do there is record the conditions at the time, or we can backtrack your sighting on weather apps and things to have a look at what the wind was doing on the day that you found a viable fragment. And what we're hoping this information will do will give us enough ground information to find where's the best place to install a collection station for these fragments, where's the best place to do the restoration when we eventually get into doing that in Pittwater. And so this is what you'll be looking for. These are viable fragments of posidonia. They have the brown, it almost looks kind of furry, it's very fibrous, and it's also tough to the touch. So if you squeeze it, it's tough. That's the rhizome, and that's at the base. And if it has that, as well as green, healthy leaves, then it's a viable fragment. And they vary in size and shape here, as you can see. So this one on the left of the screen has multiple shoots, and this one on the right only has one shoot, but they're both great for restoration. This little diagram at the bottom shows you some of the features that we know predict survival best. So in general, bigger shoots with longer leaves, longer rhizomes and more shoots survive better than the smaller ones. And so we keep data on things like this so that we know, what's the viability of the restoration in Pittwater in the future. And then, also getting to know your wind charts and knowing, okay, when is the onshore wind in my area? That would be a good time to go and have a look. So this is only a brief overview to the project. We have projects, as I mentioned, in places like Lake Macquarie, in Botany Bay, and we also have an exciting project combining rehabilitation of the seagrass with rehabilitation of white seahorse, the iconic seahorse that I showed you at the start. And so please visit our website to find out more about all of these things. And then we're also active on social media where you can even get in contact with us if you have any questions at all.